Good morning. I am here by myself, no in-person guests, because of some changes to Ontario's COVID restrictions. I'm going to be getting deeper into that later, but first I want to talk about some changes to the podcast. I'm going to be doing more solo shows, talking about just random topics and some news stories. Today I'm going to be covering a little bit about what Doug Ford said on Tuesday at Queen's Park surrounding Thanksgiving, some interesting things there. Some other things I want to do, maybe try experimenting with Skype and having guests on remotely. It's not the same as talking to somebody face to face, but it's better than nothing. So I would definitely rather try that than just not have any guests at all. It'll be cool to try a little bit of both, the solo shows and the guests, and see which one I prefer, I guess, and which one anybody who's listening prefers. I'm happy to hear any feedback that you guys have, any suggestions. Always welcome. So getting into the first thing I want to talk about is the new testing rules. There's a lot of changes happening in Ontario, the testing rules being the first of which. So on Sunday recently, a few days ago, they stopped all testing because there's a huge backlog of tests. There's about 90,000 test backlog on Friday, October 2nd. On Monday, that was down to 68,000, but essentially we're so backlogged in tests in Ontario that the province is having to send them all the way to California to a company called Quest Diagnostics based out of New Jersey in order to process tests. The problem is I stumbled upon an article about Quest Diagnostics. They used to process tests for the state of Florida. Last month, the state of Florida stopped sending their tests to Quest Diagnostics because they were taking months to get these test results back. So hopefully we have more success with the company and they got their shit together. Otherwise, the wait time for tests is going to get a heck of a lot worse than it is now with the current backlog. So some of the reasons Doug Ford is saying we're so backed up right now. First of all, he says there's a shortage of reagent, which is an important chemical in the processing of the tests. I'm not a medical expert, don't quote me on it. That's just what I read. Another thing that he said is that there's a shortage of diagnostic lab technicians. So what the province is trying to do in response to that, they're reaching out to universities, reaching out to private labs, trying to increase the capacity of tests that they can do per day so they can reduce that backlog, get people's test results back sooner, and of course reduce wait times. Those are all good things, So hopefully the new system that they're doing works, but it's too soon to tell so far. As of Tuesday, they're not doing walk-ins anymore, and you can't just get tested if you're asymptomatic, unless you're in a high-risk category. So as to what that means, I'm not 100% certain. It either means maybe high risk in terms of health, so people who have pre-existing conditions, but I would imagine it either instead means people who are in contact or likely to be in contact with people who have COVID, or maybe it applies to both categories of people. Again, I'm not 100% certain, so don't quote me on that either. But what I can be certain of is if you have symptoms, the process for getting tested now is you want to call an assessment center, speak to a nurse practitioner. They'll ask you basic screening questions. We've all been screened probably dozens of times by now. It's more or less just symptoms that you're experiencing, who you've been in contact with, if you've been in contact with anyone who's tested positive, if you've been outside of the country in the past 14 days. I don't know exactly what the questions are. It's been a while since I've been tested. I think the last time was way back in July. Time flies. Time has really been flying by with this pandemic. July feels like it was just a couple of weeks ago, but here we are, already over a week into October. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy how 2020's been flying by. So I guess we're improving the testing capacity. Like I said, we're moving in the right direction. They got 42,000 tests done yesterday on Tuesday, but people are still reporting challenges with booking appointments online, especially in hotspot areas like Toronto. Sounds like people can't get in for up to 3 days, or sometimes they can't even get in at all because there's some kind of weird situation where you can only book 48 hours in advance and these spots are just filling up super fast. So a lot of people are probably honestly getting frustrated and maybe not getting tested at all, which isn't good for anybody because then we're losing that opportunity to find more cases and prevent the spread, right? Which is what we all want. We all want to get back to some semblance of normal life sooner rather than later. And I guess the more thorough that we can be with our testing, the more efficient we can be with that, the better. But it's not all about the testing. It's also about having the appropriate restrictions. So looking at the new restrictions in Ontario, I'm not going to give my opinion on whether or not I think that they're appropriate or going to be effective. I'm just going to give you the facts. So, give a little context. Ontario is experiencing a pretty significant spike in cases. So to be specific, we had 732 new COVID cases on Friday, October 2nd, which was the single day record for the whole pandemic in Ontario. On top of that, if you look at the 7-day rolling average back at the start of August, it was just under 100. Right now, it's over 600. So there's about 6 times as many new cases per day in Ontario alone. I mean, all of Canada is experiencing a pretty significant spike. I think Quebec is maybe one of the worst hit, because from what I was reading while I was researching some of these numbers for Ontario, they're getting hit even in remote areas, like in northern Quebec, they're getting hit. So there's some talk in the province of maybe having everybody stay home. And I don't know if they mean in the sense of how it was in March and April. That would be pretty brutal, obviously very tough on any small businesses and people who rely on those small businesses for their income. It's going to have a huge ripple effect if they do have to shut down like they did in the spring. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. I mean, Thanksgiving, everybody's saying that this Thanksgiving weekend is going to be very pivotal in Canada's fight against COVID. And, well, I don't know. It's probably going to take a couple of weeks to really see what happens. Again, I'm not a medical expert, so I'm just kind of speculating based on what I'm reading, just like most everybody else does. Trying to make sense of all the information out there and trying to make sense of all the madness in the world today, right? I mean, that's all anybody can do. So on Monday, the province's Associate Chief Medical Officer, Barbara, I'm not sure if it's Yaff or Yaffe, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. She recommends that we spend the holiday, or not even just the holiday, I think just in general it applies, with people only in our immediate household, which is, like I was alluding to earlier, is why I'm not having a guest on here right now. Because I don't want to risk getting a fine or something, having people not from my household over, and then publishing that online. That would be pretty stupid. And it would be very difficult to deny that if I wanted to, fight the ticket. There really wouldn't be any fighting it. So I just want to play it safe. I'm not necessarily worried about getting COVID. I would definitely be worried about spreading it to people, but I'm feeling pretty confident that at my age, the fact that I exercise a lot, I'm not like the most perfect eater, but I try to get some fruits and veggies in there from time to time, which is always good. Very important things, like early on in the pandemic, not a lot of people talked about that kind of stuff. Everybody focused in on the social distancing, focused in on the isolation sort of stuff, and it's important to stay healthy as well, both physically and mentally. But, going back to the changes, a lot of people seem to be confused, myself included, because it doesn't really feel consistent with how the restrictions work. So essentially, we can't have a family gathering of up to 10 people for Thanksgiving. But if you want to go to the casino with 6 friends from various households, that's totally fine. Or a bar or a restaurant. These things are all totally fine. And depending on the size of the venue, I think you can have up to 100 people at these kinds of places. And that would be in line with public health guidelines, as long as they follow other guidelines as well. I'm not sure what those would be. I would imagine wearing a mask and having hand sanitizer available and those sorts of things, because now, of course, it's mandatory to wear a mask everywhere in the province. Most municipalities already had a law covering that, I guess, or a bylaw would be the proper term for it. So yeah, you can be in a group of 6 at restaurants. You can have up to 100 people at bars, restaurants. The fact that the casinos are opening or planning to open soon around Thanksgiving, at the same time that we're getting this news, we cannot have family gatherings of people from other households, even if we're responsible, even if we take all the same precautions that these businesses are taking with hundreds of people from dozens of households there at once. Even if we do all of these things as responsible adults, responsible Canadian citizens, we still cannot have family gatherings. That's apparently how things are right now. And so, getting into the confusion, and Doug Ford trying to clear up that confusion yesterday at Queen's Park, I'm not really sure that he cleared the confusion up at all. In fact, I think, if anything, he just added more to the confusion, because there's a lot of mixed messaging in what he was talking about at Queen's Park. And so I've got some clips here prepared for you. I've never done clips in the podcast before until now, so bear with me with this. The first clip I want to show you is basically just a reporter kind of asking Doug Ford about the confusion. And so you're going to hear the question and then as well as the response here.
We're hearing a lot from our audience about confusion overall about what parents should do. It's okay to go to a club as long as there's 99 people there until midnight or till 11, whatever the rule is, but don't go visit your grandparents. Stay with your family, but you can go out for dinner for as long as there's only 6 people. What do you say to people who are just flat out confused, and they don't know what to do, and they're trying to do the right thing, and they're very, very worried about where Ontario is going, because it feels like things are getting worse and it's not working? We hear that all the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll be very frank. I'm hearing the total opposite. We're flattening the curve. We're putting the protocols in, and I'm just going to compare restaurants to going over and seeing your loved ones. And this is going to be about as clear as I can be for Thanksgiving. What we're asking: try to stay within the family. If you're going over, and I understand there's a lot of single people out there, if they have a family they're close to, please wear a mask, keep social distance.
So I just want to pause it there for a second. And he didn't say within the household. He said within the family. So it's not exactly in line with what was said on Monday. I guess you could interpret it as within the household, but certainly within the family doesn't necessarily mean within the household. I have family that lives 4 hours away. That would be within the family, but I mean that would probably not be a good idea, especially because they live in a much higher risk area than I do. So getting back into the clip, Doug Ford goes a little bit further into his explanation to try and clear up the confusion. Let's see if this helps a little bit more.
And regarding restaurants, that's like apples and bananas. When you go into a restaurant, they're taking everyone's name. You have 6 at a table. They have dividers. They have protocols in place. And the rest of the people in the restaurant, you don't know. That's the difference. At a family, you know the people.
Hold on a second. Apples to bananas? I think it's apples to oranges. Also, I really don't understand the argument there. That argument doesn't make any sense because, first of all, wouldn't contact tracing a family gathering of 10 people be easier than a casino of 100 people? And I don't understand how being a stranger would make transmission any less likely. I mean, if I know you, how is it more likely that I'm going to transmit COVID to you? Especially in a place like a restaurant where maybe people aren't always socially distanced 100% of the time. If you have 6 people and they're all from different households, there's definitely a chance of transmission there. And I think in some places that's kind of what was happening. Like in London, there's a story about these students and they were intermingling with each other, and maybe they weren't hanging out in super large groups at a time. I'm not 100% sure of the story, but basically, the intermingling of these households kind of helped spread this thing at Western University pretty quickly. Not just saying that I don't think that people should have the freedom to be responsible and take precautions and have those small family gatherings for Thanksgiving, but obviously it's not for me to say. So if things still aren't clear enough for you in terms of the restrictions, Doug Ford is not done explaining things. Let's see if he can finally clear things up, clear up the confusion.
Well, please, it's very simple. There's rules and there's guidelines. The rules are very clear. 10 indoors, 25 outdoors. I would really, really discourage people from having 25 people, even if it's outdoors. Stick within 10 people. And folks, we went through so much together. We can get through this. This is going to make or break it this Thanksgiving.
Hold on. What did he just say there? Did he say within the household in that clip? I don't think that he did. And, this is yesterday. This is Tuesday. This isn't from a week ago. This is yesterday, after the doctor said that we should be sticking within our own household, a medical professional that the province is put in charge of these decisions. He is saying to everybody that it is 10 people indoors, 25 people outdoors. He is literally saying that here. Okay, I'm not making this up. This isn't a deep fake. This is the real thing. This is what he said. So moving on, here's what happened next.
I have a big family, and I told Carla, I said, and she knows, we have no more than 10, and simple as that. And that's what we're going to obey by as well. And when it comes to having everyone over, your aunts and uncles, hang off on the hugging and the kissing and everything else. I just want to make through it the Thanksgiving here, but we see a little bit of the flattening right now, but we need to bring the numbers down still. So that's about as clear as I can be on that. So there shouldn't be any confusion.
Oh, there you have it. There shouldn't be any confusion whatsoever after that. I don't know about you, but I'm honestly even more confused because unless Doug Ford is living with the Brady Bunch, I don't see how he can have 10 people for Thanksgiving and have one household. That would mean he would have to be living with 9 people altogether, including him, plus potentially one other household, one other single-person household. And that would still be legal, right? But I don't imagine that's a very common situation nowadays. Most people don't have 9 people living in one house. That would be a pretty uncommon thing. So yeah, actually, I think that this creates more confusion than anything, and it's kind of funny that he says, or that he's very explicit how it should clear things up, because it's very contradictory to what the health professionals are saying here. And somebody actually calls him out, and I have that here. I want to show you that.
Thank you. And Premier, my next question is for you. Yesterday, the Associate Medical Officer of Health said she recommended people stick only to their immediate family for Thanksgiving dinner. you just a few minutes ago said stick to the limit of 10 people. That is mixed messaging, is it not?
No, no.
And it's confusing people out there. So which one is it? Because, I live in a small home with under 10, but you're saying I could have 10.
If you
But
play, yeah, sorry,
medical
sorry,
officer
Cynthia,
tells
but if
say
you,
only the people I live with.
so if you play it back, I said stick within your household. Your household. That's what I said. So
Play it back. Well, I can actually do just that, you see.
10 indoors, 25 outdoors. I would really, really discourage people from having 25 people, even if it's outdoors. Stick within 10 people.
So again, I mean, I played it back, just like he said, and you can clearly hear it. 10 people indoors, 25 people outdoors. And, he's confused about why there's all of this confusion when, the reason that there is because he's saying one thing and then he's saying another thing. Like, this literally happened all within 3 minutes. He said this, he made those comments about having the 10 people indoors, 25 people outdoors, as well as, doubling down on it, talking about how his own family plans on having no more than 10 people. Basically, talking about how he already has these plans, more or less. And, not even 3 minutes later, a reporter calls him out on it, and he, completely backtracks on it and goes the other way, saying, oh, no, you can play back the tape. I said stick to your household, but that's not the case at all. Not at all, because, the closest thing he said to that was stick within your family. He never at any point in the whole briefing up to this point said anything about sticking to your household. But now that somebody calls him out on it, he does.
That's what I believe in. Let's just get through this. I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Yaffe, but the message is clear. Stay within your household when possible. And I say when possible, if you have one person lives by themselves and they have a small social group that they've been with, that they can't be left alone. But again, stick within your household. That's what I'm saying.
So yeah, those are the actual rules at the very end there, once he gets called out on having them wrong. So I can understand why people are confused, but, to clarify, it is unfortunately only within our own households. I'm not condoning anybody to break the rules, but yeah, I definitely don't agree with it. I'm not saying I agree that people shouldn't be able to have these 10-person gatherings and be responsible. If perhaps the alternative is to have Thanksgiving at the casino. That's what some people are joking about online, and maybe that's not a bad idea. I'm joking, of course. I'm not much of a person to go to the casino. I've never had much luck there, only been a couple of times. So, unless you're Doug Ford, you can only stick to your own household. Doug Ford can have 10 people, from what it sounds like, but anybody else, household only. And if you have a single person household, somebody you know who's got nobody to hang out with on Thanksgiving, that's okay too. Or if you want to, take 6 friends from, 6 different households and go to a restaurant, fair game. But, don't have grandma and grandpa over, guys. That's too risky. Okay? If you want to meet them at the casino, that's probably cool. That should be okay. I don't think COVID can get into the casino. No worries there. But, just don't have them over for dinner or anything at your house, because that's way too dangerous. So, I want to just leave some open-ended questions. Let you guys decide for yourselves. Do the regulations in Ontario make sense from a public health standpoint? And personally, it kind of seems like there's maybe a financial factor in deciding what we are and aren't allowed to do. Maybe if they were able to tax us on the time that we spend with our families, we would be allowed to do that this Thanksgiving. It's hard to say. So to put it into perspective as to why it doesn't really make sense to me, we have classrooms with as many as 30 kids. Like I said, restaurants, casinos, and bars with as much as 100 people is the maximum capacity. And then you have larger stores like department stores, grocery stores with even larger capacities. So it really doesn't make sense how, if these kinds of places with all of these moving parts and all of these people from, like I said, dozens and dozens of different households coming together, why is it that they can have a chance to be responsible, but private citizens can't do that in their own home? It doesn't make sense. There's just, I don't think people would have a problem with the regulations if they made sense. But the problem is they don't. And an even bigger problem is the fact that our own premier, one of the people who plays a critical role in making these regulations, clearly doesn't even know them himself. And so it's really hard for people to trust the government and what they're saying when that's the case, when there's such a disconnect between what one person is saying and then what another person is saying. And it's kind of like 2020 in a nutshell, really. There's just so much misinformation, and I don't think there's any malice to it. I just think that he doesn't really know what he's talking about here in this situation, which is unfortunate. He really should, because this is very confusing, it's very misleading, and it's very frustrating on top of an already increasingly frustrating situation. Anyways, that's all I got for today. One thing I want to leave off with is, it's important that we don't become so afraid of death and dying that we all stop living, right? And what I mean by that is we can't just hide away and stop living our lives because we fear something that may or may not kill us. There's plenty of things that can kill you besides COVID. And, being sedentary and cooped up in the house all day is one of those things. So, definitely be cautious, be vigilant, wash your hands, wear a mask, socially distance yourself from people, stay healthy, stay active, keep your mind busy. All of these things are great things. Get a good night's sleep. I mean, it's different for everybody, just find whatever works for you, whatever helps get you through the day. And hopefully we'll be out of this soon, but I feel like we're still going to be in the pandemic for a while. And the winter is going to be rough, probably. So we'll see what happens. Anyways, that's all I got.